All right, everybody, welcome to our next topic, which is reporting research. So this is important for a number of reasons, because you will be reading reported research in this class, as well as reporting research yourself. So this is meant to be just a sort of general overview about the different parts of a research report, and why we do research reports, all right? So research reports are done so scientists can communicate with each other. When we try and communicate in a uniform way so that it's easy to sort through the information that is out there. So a research report is more than just explaining data, all right? A research report tries to explain what the information you have contributes to our greater knowledge. So I have this image here, the tree of knowledge, which I think is just wonderful, all right, because it includes things like culture, our minds, right, within ourselves, life, and then into the physical sciences. But over on the right, I think this is an even better explanation of sort of the spectrum of science that we have. All right, so science is basically looking for patterns. All right, so we talked about the scientific method. We look for things like repetition. And then we have a sort of trickle down of the different types of sciences, right? We have social sciences that look at culture, belief systems. Then we move into psychology, which is the study of the mind, and that's where we're at, all right? And we sort of bridge the gap between social science and biology because we often think about physiological influences to the mind, of course, the brain as a biological structure. And then we move into the sort of physical sciences here. The other thing I think is really important on this particular graph is that it shows that science is our understanding of these things at a certain point in time. All right. Science is a snapshot of what we understand at the time. And I think that this is often overlooked, right? And that science is looked at as either a culmination of everything we know about the past and predicting the future. And it does try to do those things, but we still must address it as a snapshot in time. Okay. So let's take a look, all right, at the structure of research reports. Let me get my head out of here. All right, so we're going to write a research report, and it's going to look something like this, okay? You'll have a title page, you'll have an abstract. Title will go again just before your introduction, and you'll see that in the examples we give of APA formatted papers. And then you write the sort of bulk of your paper, and that's made up of your introduction, your method, your results, and what we call the discussion. And then we'll have references and sometimes, in some cases, an appendix. And we'll get to that after we talk about the discussion. But I have a sort of an analogy here that I like to use, is that a research paper is like an hourglass, right? Or it sort of works in this shape where you start very broadly by introducing your topic. You get a little more narrow when you explain your method for explaining or for investigating that topic. And then your results are very, very specific to your study, all right? Very specific, not general at all. And then our discussion sort of re-broadens and explains your results in relation to what's already known. So again, we kind of move in a funnel. We start very broad, we get very specific with our hypothesis, our method, our results. And then we sort of take that information and see how it compares or how it relates to what the rest of the field has to say, right? Do we agree with what we found in our literature search, which is something that we'll be discussing in this class, or not, right? Do we agree with what's already been found or not? All right, and then the references are a list of our sources. We'll be spending lots of time on culminating sources and citing our sources. And then our appendix is any additional materials. So in our case, that would be maybe the survey that we use. So again, we'll get into that in a bit here. But we'll start with just, all right, we're keeping it very cut and dry here. We're just going to talk about what is included on these components or in these components of the paper. So you'll have a title page. Title page includes the title of your study, as well as your name, the author name, or authors if you're collaborating. That would be outside of this class. You want a good title. you want a title that explains what your paper is about and that would attract people who are interested in your research. So it should inform readers of the major features of your research, being maybe the variables you use or the hypothesis that's driving your study. So if we take a look here, I have just for our entertainment some interesting titles, okay? One of my personal favorites here on the left. This was actually a two-part paper. The first one was called Of Mice and the second of Men, but it makes for a sort of a humorous, right, funny title. And then I'll just let you read through these on the right, sort of on your own here. But the idea is that you can have a little bit of wit, you can have a little bit of humor in your title, but you can't leave out what it's really about, right? You want to sort of allude to your results, you want to include the variables that you used, and you want to sort of direct the reader to what your hypothesis is. So that's sort of a tall order for a title that's meant to be relatively short, but we'll already want to start thinking about that, right? Maybe you're interested in the amount of units that students are taking, and how much sleep they get, all right? You would want to make sure that both of those variables are included in your title so that people know what they're in for when they start to read your paper. So that's the title. The abstract sort of elaborates on this some more, all right? The abstract helps someone determine if they want to read your paper, and it summarizes the report, all right? And we do this almost at the very end. It's almost the very last thing we do, because once your paper is complete, you'll write up the summary about it, and it'll be right at the front of your paper, right? So someone can read about what you did, and determine if they want to look any deeper into your paper. So we have an example of one here. A general rule of thumb for an abstract is you take about one sentence from each of your major paper sections in order to summarize. All right, we have the introduction. So the introduction comes right after your concise title. You'll have the title of your paper and then you will jump into your introduction. So the introduction is one of the largest or longest sections of the paper. Because you're setting up what you're going to do. You're setting up the variables that you will be investigating. You're setting up your hypothesis. And it takes a little bit of time, right? You're going to set up or talk about what other scientists have done up until this point. Most of your literature review will be used here. You'll be citing lots of papers in your introduction because you'll be explaining what research has already been done. And then you'll describe the need to investigate this, right? Why do we care, right? Is sort of what you want to explain. You can explain that we just want to investigate it, for the fun of it. We're continuing to investigate something that's being currently investigated by other scientists, or it can be to solve a problem, right? Or resolve an issue that's seen in previous research. And then your introduction will end with your specific prediction or hypothesis. All right, we have our method section. This is pretty important considering we're in a research methods class. The method explains what you did, all right? If you conduct a study, it should explain all parts of that study so that someone else could come along and replicate it later if they wanted to. So you would include things like your participants, you would include things like the materials you used, and the procedure that you did. So for this class, our methods will be a little bit easy because it'll all be the same, right? We're all going to be completing a research project using survey research, but you'll include who your participants are, summarize who they are, list the materials you use, such as your survey, and then explain how you accumulated data. All right, and then next we're on to results. Results are your statistical analyses, all right? This will be where you take all of your data, run some statistical tests on it, describe the data, and then that's it really. We visualize the data, but the results are often confused with the interpretation of the results. The results are just presented, all right? We don't make any conclusions, we do not interpret, we just present them here. So if you remember back to statistics, we have two different branches of statistics. We have descriptive and inferential statistics. You can use them both here. Even if you have an inferential test that you can make an inference about, you save that for the discussion, right? And we will get into all of this in greater depth as we work through these paper sections ourselves. This is just meant to be an overview of what belongs in each of these sections. So as alluded to, the discussion section explains your findings. This is where you get to sort of put yourself into this. You get to talk about the content of your results and how it relates to your introduction of the topic. So you'll basically be discussing whether or not your hypothesis was supported. And you'll be including limitations of the study. And what limitations are ways that the study could have been improved. And every study has limitations, right? Maybe our sample size wasn't quite big enough. Maybe we didn't get a representative sample for the group we wanted to make a statement about. Maybe we forgot to include a very important question on our survey that we didn't realize until afterwards. So you'll discuss your limitations here. And this is where other scientists who are reading your paper can get ideas on what to improve upon for their study. So limitations are a great piece of information to look for in studies that are similar to what you'll be doing, because then you can see where you might be able to improve upon previous work. All right, the last idea here is bias, okay? Research reports, even with all of these rules and regulations, can still be biased. They can still be completed for a number of reasons, can be funded for a number of reasons. So we just need to be careful, all right? When we read a study, we need to think about the who, what, where, when, and why. Why was this research done? Should I be trusting this source, all right? And we will talk about in this class. Professionally respected sources, which try to eliminate bias. But it's important to also realize that bias in individuals cannot be eliminated entirely. I have bias, you have bias, everybody does, right? Bias is not an inherently negative word, but we just need to be aware of it, right? I like to say that science is my bias, but I'll let you decide what to think about that. But we want science to be as free from bias as possible, including sampling in a biased way, having a biased hypothesis. So we don't need to elaborate on this all too much, but just take into account, right, when you're reading a research paper, like why was this done and who is this aiming to serve? And another very interesting point about bias that I'll mention here while we're all living in the modern world together. Bias comes in ways that you might not ever expect. You've maybe heard of something called the confirmation bias, all right, where we are more likely to seek out information that confirms our own beliefs. And as if humans don't have enough of an issue with this as it is, our artificial intelligence systems are actually making this even more prominent, right? If you look up news from a certain political party, your AI, right, the artificial intelligence in your phone, in Google, on your device, will be more likely to show you information that you want to see, all right? So just think about this, right? Think about your bias. Think about where you're getting your information, who you're more likely to trust, and remember that, I'll try and say this as simply as possible, facts in science are hard to come by, all right? Science is a fluid process, and oftentimes we just have what we believe at that time, all right, or what our information best explains at that time. So just be careful, right? Be mindful, be critical of what people have to say, right? And by critical doesn't mean mean, it just means to be a critical consumer of information, right? And don't just believe anything that's told to you at face value, even if it is published science, all right? Make sure that we're being critical consumers of information. All right, well, that includes our overview of research reports. I'll see you over in the next lecture.